The topic of today relates to practice habits and how to increase your score by having really good practice habits. I'm going to go ahead and start with a few quotes. The mark of a successful exam prep student is the mastery of not only knowing what to study, but how to study it. This is very true. A lot of students know what they have to study for the TOEFL, but very few know how to actually study it, how to study for the TOEFL exam. And that's what we will be talking about today. Second quote, the mark of a successful exam prep student is doing what you have to do so that you can do what you want to do. Not every aspect of studying is pleasant or nice or fun, but you do what you have to do so that you can do what you want to do. That doing what you want to do relates to your trying to go to a master's program, a university program for a bachelor's, trying to be able to get a certificate to be a nurse or be a pharmacist in the United States. There are many reasons that people take this exam, but you do what you have to do so that you can do what you want to do. And then the final quote before we get started, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make it drink. Who can tell me in the chat box? Who can tell me in the chat box how this quote relates to our topic for today? Now, we're going to go over 4 areas of practice analysis: listening practice habits, reading practice methods, writing practice routines, and speaking practice mechanisms. And we're going to go through each one individually. And then at the end of the course, I'm going to go over just some general habits that apply to the entire exam overall. So let's go ahead and first get started with our how to practice for the exam and how this relates to the listening section of the exam. So in terms of some listening practice suggestions, we're going to go over keeping synonym and paraphrase tables, tracking and analyzing mistakes, vocabulary new and misspelled, and also transcript usage. If you are studying for the IELTS exam and you want to do well at listening, you should be practicing in these 4 areas. And these 4 areas really relate to skills. See, doing well on the exam is about mastering certain skills, certain English skills. And the better you are at these skills, the greater chance you have of doing well on the exam. So first, let's talk about synonyms and paraphrase tables. All right, that's what we're going to talk about first. So how do you do it? Well, first of all, you're going to do a listening practice. And if you're using the proper course strategy, you already have noted the question keywords, because for every listening question, it's about being able to know the question keywords and then being able to hear those question keywords properly and how they connect to the correct answer choice. However, after you have gone ahead and done a practice, what you do is you go through and you create a table. And you put the question keywords on the left side of the table, and you put their synonym or their paraphrase match from the audio. And this is something that you do every time you do a listening practice. And the reason why you do it is you start really training your mind on being able to listen for synonyms and paraphrase matches. Because on the listening exam, the correct answer choice always connects to a synonym or a paraphrase of something that was said in the question. So you want to get better at this skill, and this is how you do it, right? This is how you do it. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. Your brain starts automatically listening for the synonym or the paraphrase. And then you're going to be able to answer more things correctly. So that's the first practice habit when it comes to listening. Second, let's talk about tracking and analyzing mistakes. Right? If I asked most of you this question and I said, well, how many of you, after finishing a listening practice, do you create a chart of all of your mistakes, of how you're making mistakes? And the vast majority of students will say, no, I don't. Right? I just take one test, look at what I got right or wrong, then I jump to the next test and I do it. And they say, well, I keep making the same mistakes. I'm not improving. Well, you have to practice tracking and analyzing your mistakes. So for example, again, for every question that you answer incorrectly, you will put that question on the left side of a table. And then on the right side, you're going to analyze the mistake that you made, right? Why did I make a mistake? How did I make a mistake in this area? And so if you're constantly tracking your mistakes, then you're going to start being able to see patterns. You'll begin to be able to see, well, you know, I made this same mistake last time, right? I have to stop making this same mistake because every time I make this mistake, I'm choosing the wrong answer choice. And again, this is not, a lot of students, what they want to do is they just say, well, if I just keep taking test after test after test, I'm going to get better. And that's why some students, why do I keep getting a 6 over and over and over again? Well, you have to be able to look at your mistakes, not just look at the mistake, but actually track your mistakes. Something else that a person can do also is they can also have a third column. Like here we have 2 columns, but also you can have a third column where you put down what was the correct answer and analyze why that was the correct answer. So that's actually really good to do also, where you have, instead of 2 columns like I have here, to have 3 columns. The question, the mistake you made and why you made it, and then third column, the correct answer choice and why that's the correct answer choice in terms of what they said. Now, vocabulary is another great practice habit to have when it comes to listening. And when we're talking about vocabulary, we're talking about new and misspelled words. So every time you do a listening, right, you should do 2 activities. You should put any words in the questions that are new for you. You should put any words that are new from the audio that you've never heard. And when you're making and creating a vocabulary list, a running vocabulary list, it's a really good idea to put in, of course, the definition, the context, and synonyms of that word. Again, if you are consistently doing this, then you're going to improve your overall vocabulary. The better your vocabulary, the easier it is to listen, right? That's just a fact. The more vocabulary you have, the easier it is to listen, read, write, and speak. So vocabulary in general is just something that really applies to everything. And you build your vocabulary through the listening process, reading process, and also the writing process is how you build your vocabulary. But you have to have consistent habits, everybody. Consistent habits to be able to do that. Also, when it comes to vocabulary in terms of listening, is you want to keep track of your misspelled words. Again, a lot of students have very poor practice habits when it comes to this. Hold on, everyone, please. Don't mark and annotate. Right? Please don't do that. I've disabled it already. Don't mark and annotate on the screen. Okay. Now, when it comes to misspelling, what a lot of students do is they say, oh, I misspelled that word. But they don't know how to really overcome that problem. So the way you overcome this problem is you keep track. You put on the left side of a table the word that you misspell. On the right side, you put the word that the correct spelling of the word. And so you avoid this consistent problem by keeping track of the words that you are misspelling, right? You keep that. So, you have to also, what you might be able to end up doing when you're tracking your misspelled words is you will start to come across patterns of making the same type of spelling mistake over again. And then you kind of know what you need to specifically study when it comes to vocabulary. Maybe you're having trouble with endings. Maybe you're having trouble with I before E. Maybe you're having trouble with a particular sound. But if you keep track, what you end up doing is when you're keeping track of misspelled words, you're able to see what specific type of mistake am I making, and then you know what to research and try to correct. All right, so let's talk about using the transcripts. So, of course, you find the transcripts in the back of your book, right? You find the transcripts in the back of your book. And it's a great way for being able to improve your overall listening are with the transcripts. So after completing a listening practice, you go to the back of the book and you find the transcript. It's a great idea to read through and become familiar with how the different parts are structured and how answers are delivered. This will help you understand what the timing between answers in a question. So if you really read transcripts and look at transcripts, you really become more comfortable and familiar with what they're doing and what they're talking about. If you're only listening and you never look at what they're saying, then you don't become as comfortable. Also, when you look at a transcript, you're able to really start looking at how much space is between the questions. And also what you're able to see many times also is how questions come in different paragraphs. What that lets you know is you have to be able to recognize when they're making shifts in a conversation, right? Or shifts in a one-person lecture, right? So, you can see from the paragraphs, you have to be able to hear a topic sentence. Our boats are huge. There's going to be a question and answer to come about that. We upgrade all of our boats. There's going to be a question and answer about that. We offer you a free lunchbox. There's going to be a question and answer about that, right? So being able to understand where questions come from and how they're sectioned from different parts of a conversation or different parts of a one-person speech or lecture, that lets you know, well, I have to listen for the transition, and then there's going to be some question and answer after that transition happens. But you only get an awareness of this by reading through and analyzing transcripts for structure. Another great way to improve your listening score in terms of practice is by being able to play the audio and read through or look at the transcript while you're listening to the audio. That also helps you in terms of improving your understanding of what they're saying, being able to look at some of the words that they say where you weren't clear on the pronunciation, right? So that's another great way of being able to practice. Okay, so coming up, we're going to go over how to practice for the exam, and we're going to look at it within the context of the reading section. So in terms of reading practice suggestions, you can see that some of the reading practice suggestions and listening practice suggestions are actually the same, right? Synonym and paraphrase tables, tracking and analyzing mistakes, vocabulary, new, but don't worry about misspell. That shouldn't be there. It should be just new vocabulary. And then also the timed scanning practice, which is a really good, skill to improve on also. So again, when it comes to synonym and paraphrase tables, you want to be able to look at the question keywords on one side and be able to look at the paraphrase on the other, right? This really helps you, again, with being able to answer questions, because many students waste so much time. They waste so much time when it comes to the reading section because they can't find the matching sentence, because they can't find the synonym or the paraphrase. And I get questions all the time, how do I get better at this? Well, you practice it, right? You practice it. So after you do a reading passage, you take the question keywords and you put them on the left, and you put the passage or synonym paraphrasing on the right. Now here, in what you're looking at the image here, I'm putting full questions and the passage part where it comes from on the right-hand side. But also a great way to do it is simply like this, where you put the question keywords on the left side and the similar words in the passage on the right side. And every time you do a reading passage, this is what you do every single time, because this is how they disguise answer choices. And this is how they disguise the matching sentence to the question. Because if you understand test design, this is how you create a test question for the IELTS exam. You look in a paragraph, you take one or two sentences from that paragraph, and from those one or two sentences, you create a question and you derive an answer, right? So when you're taking the test, you have to do the opposite of that. You're given the question, you're taking the keywords from the question, going and finding the sentence that it comes from so that you can see the correct answer choice. But if you do this over and over again, you're going to improve. Also, you want to be able to go through and have timed scanning practice, right? Time scanning practice is really, really helpful, right? So with time scanning practice, you might choose a reading passage. I personally like to use passages from the older books because I would, if I were a student and studying for the test, I'm going to use the newer books for my test simulation practicing, like book 14, 15, 16, 17. And then for my skills practice, I might use the older books, such as book 6, 7, 8, right, for skills practice. So that's something that's really great to do. But time scanning practice, right? So with time scanning practice, you put the question keywords on the left side of your table, and then you would set a timer. So if you have 10 questions there, you'll set a timer for 4 minutes, and then you'll practice scanning through a passage and trying to locate each one of those questions, each one of those matching sentences in under 4 minutes. And then if you get really good at doing 10 questions in 4 minutes, lower the time. Go from 4 minutes to 3 minutes and see if you can scan and locate the matching sentence for 10 questions in 3 minutes. Because the faster you are at doing that and the more accurate you are at doing that, the better you're going to be able to do at reading. What happens to a lot of students in terms of why they get bad scores is because they overread, right? They overread. I told you already how a question and answer are designed. What you also need to know is where wrong answers come from. Wrong answers come from sentences that are outside of the keyword sentence. So when you overread and you read too much, you read information for wrong answer choices, and then you become confused and pick bad answers. So The test is designed for scanning. It's a scanning test, not a reading test. I know it says reading, but it is a scanning and skimming skills test. So the more accurate you do that, the better you're going to score.